The Origins of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, The Untold Story, a mini documentary on the history and origins of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu beyond the Gracie family and Mitsuyo Maeda. I'm
Mhm.
joined by Professor Gustavo Gasperin,
Thank
who
you.
produced this video here. And I have some questions. First and foremost, I want to say I was really, thank you for coming on to Conversations with Garmamie.
Yeah, thank you for inviting. That's my pleasure for sure.
And I must say, I really enjoyed the video you put together. I watched it a couple of times. A lot of questions came to my mind, and I'm sure a lot of
Mhm.
people have asked you many, many questions. Now,
Yeah.
Professor, the first question I'd like to ask you is why did you create this video? What was the intent?
Yeah, the idea was just to really spread a little more of knowledge to the community, and because I believe most people don't really know or understand the history of our martial arts because of misinformation that have been spread out, or because people just they don't they don't read books, and they don't are not really interested in going deep, so they just listen to people, and then if there's a credible person saying something, they might take that idea and believe that's true, but sometimes it's not. It's just an account of what happened, not really based in facts. So, and that happened to me too. I didn't know much of the history until I started researching and reading more. What I learned, the thing that I know, that the history that I learned was uh, in my first year of training when I was a white belt in 1997. We had a discussion with my instructor, and he told us what he knew at the time. But things have had changed from that time to now, and because there was not much information too, internet wasn't or much big thing, no YouTube at that time. So, and books in Brazil, they were not really, there weren't many options there, especially about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There were a lot of judo stuff, but for us at that time, judo and jiu-jitsu, they were completely different things, and that's how it was taught to us, that jiu-jitsu and judo were completely different things. Jiu-jitsu came, or Brazilian jiu-jitsu came from Japanese jiu-jitsu. That was the what was spread at the time. And what happened was that maybe around 4 or 5 years ago, I released a video on my YouTube channel. I was explaining how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu works in terms of techniques and positions, but I opened up the video talking about very briefly about the histories, without even, because that was so ingrained in my mind that I didn't even confirm the information that I had, right? That I learned like, I don't know, 20 years ago, right?
Mhm.
So I opened up the video saying, hey, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu came from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and Helio and Carlos Gracie were the creators of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That was my knowledge at that time, 5 years ago. And then the video blow up, and then I started receiving a lot of comments saying, hey, the video is great, but no, this part of the history is not very accurate. So then after that, I started taking a little more interest about the history, and
Now,
things just.
Now, this is interesting. Just following up on that, what sort of feedback are you getting from this particular video from the jujitsu slash martial arts community? Is it generally positive, negative, critical? Give us an idea of sort of the
Yeah,
feedback you're
so
getting.
yeah, it's been very, very positive, because people from both sides, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo, and even traditional Jiu-Jitsu, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, they are really liking the video and saying that's pretty accurate. Of course, there are the extremists, right, that favor Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and favor Judo with too much passion without really basing their ideas on real facts, and then that always generates some friction there. But that's normal, right? But the people who are really interested in facts, or what has been discovered so far, then they are really, really liking the video much, way more than the first one that I did like 5 years ago, when I didn't have much idea.
You know, it's interesting because in about 24 minutes, you cover such a range of topics. You do it in a really well scripted fashion. You know, you have an excellent script, lots of
Thank you.
good footage to cut to, and it presents a lot of facts, as you mentioned. And for me, I'm a grappling fan. I'm more of a fan of judo, Olympic judo. But of course, you know, the power of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and its influence, particularly in North America in relation to mixed martial arts and no gi, submission wrestling, and so on, is monumental. So how can you not be a fan of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? I think it's impossible. You have to appreciate all the different styles of martial arts. But in this video, what I took away was really like, I feel like you've opened the door and really created a conversation. Would you say? Would you say this has created a conversation within your community?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I believe so. Through the comments that I receive, through even people that I meet in person, you know, everybody is talking about it because, you know, I'm not pushing the envelope to either side. You know, I'm just,
You're staying very neutral. I
yeah,
agree. No, you're straight to the facts. Sorry, continue.
yeah, no problem. Just I'm trying just to show the facts what have been, you know, discovered so far. So it might change some little stuff in the future as they, you know, find out more details about. But that's what we have for now, and we cannot go against facts, even though if it's not very good for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo, that's what happened, you know.
Now, briefly, speak to us about like the interplay and interchange of the term judo and jujitsu. You mentioned that in the documentary. You mentioned about how you know, sometimes, you know, people mix both terms.
Yeah, because that happened at that time in the beginning of the 20th century, right? When the Japanese masters were coming to the West. So the art was still commonly referred, their art, which was Kodokan Judo, was still referred to Jiu-Jitsu as Jiu-Jitsu. So that created a lot of confusion. And even people say that, oh, but they thought judo in Brazil, but then the Brazilians changed the name to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But that's not true. That's just how people used to call Kodokan Judo. They used to call Jiu-Jitsu because it was still relatively new martial art. And Judo is a style of Japanese jiu-jitsu. That's how it was created. It was just initially a different style of Japanese jiu-jitsu named first uh, Kano jiu-jitsu or Kano Ryu, and then it was named Judo. So people sometimes they, you know, thinks, you know, once we see the history from, you know, from now compared to 200 years ago, it's, you know, we can have a better understanding of things, you know. At that time it was still called the same name, but of course they were different martial arts.
Now, in terms of following up on terminology, how would you differentiate between the jitsu in jujitsu and the do in judo? How do they differ?
Yeah, I think you know, now also things again, they they change over the years, right? I think nowadays the jitsu versus do, it's they are getting closer together because do means more like a way or path, more a philosophical approach to the art, as jitsu is more of a collection of techniques. Even though the names they are different, but and they mean different things, I think Brazilian jiu-jitsu is getting a little more uh, catching up with the philosophical side. You know, always had a little bit, but not much, depending on the style or the lineage of the Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That is not really almost anything of philosophy, right? It's just technique, go train hard. You know, there is not much of what Kano did to judo, right? Establishing a philosophical uh, method there. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, now is catching up a little more in some styles within Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like I said, some styles, they just still don't care, right? It's just go, 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 technique, not much worry about the philosophical side, the interaction with human people.
Now, what is the value of having philosophy in martial arts, in your opinion? What by using judo and jiu-jitsu, what's the real value added of having a philosophical foundation and base, in your opinion?
Uh-huh. I think we see, I think it's just creating better people, creating better humans. We see, what, because if you don't have that philosophy behind, you can just create some highly skilled people that have no control and can, which happened a lot in Brazil in the past, they can just beat up people on the street, right? As an example. And they don't take the learning of the martial art, and they can transfer what they learn in the dojo to their lives as uh, being someone who uh, has perseverance, persistence, and all those values that you can transfer from judo or jiu-jitsu. Now, every day in the gym suffering, you can use that in your own life to just become a better person or more successful person, right? If
Mhm.
you are a black belt in either art, you went through so much sacrifice and pain most of the time that eventually you succeed getting into that black belt. It's the same thing for life, right?
Mm.
Nothing, it comes very easy. You have to work for, and it just teaches you that. But if you don't explain that, if you just teach martial art is something that you use to beat people up, there is not really correlation, and you can create some bad people in society,
For
which
sure.
is not uncommon.
No doubt, no doubt. Speaking of beating people up, challenge matches. Let's talk about the role they played in further promoting the sport of jiu-jitsu. Speak to us about that in relation to Maeda's involvement in challenge matches and how you say it got him in trouble with the Kodokan.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the challenge matches have always been part of judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That's how judo came to the West, and offering, challenges, or anyone who wanted to test themselves against the Japanese, they would allow that to promote their art, right? Sometimes people with no training, sometimes people from other martial arts would go against them. So that's just to prove the effectiveness of the art with respect, of course, right? I'm demonstrating my art. If you think you want to try against myself, of course, we can go. That's how it was done, to promote the art and prove that the art was very effective. And that happened too in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Is the same story. It started with the Gracies, and other Brazilians also did several challenges. But again, it goes back to the philosophical thing. If you are challenging people with we have seen before, it's not, it's in a disrespectful way. It's not really I think it goes away from the martial art. It becomes more of a fighting stuff.
Mm.
So that really contributed a lot to the growth of the both martial arts, and then later in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when it came also to the US.
Now, you also make reference to a really interesting part of Brazilian combat sports history. When you talk about Siriko's, I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name, the
Yes,
capoeirista.
Siriko.
Siriaku, thank you. His match against Miyako. Tell
Mm-hmm.
us what that match meant for Brazilians and their combat sport of capoeira. And
Mm-hmm.
tell us who won.
Yeah, so that happened around, if I'm not wrong, I will have to check, but around 1909 in Brazil. And it was Miyako was the first Japanese judoka coming to Brazil, hired by the Brazilian Navy. So he taught at the Brazilian Navy. He also had a small dojo. He would teach civilians. And he had other challenging matches too, but at some point he faced Siriko, who was a capoeira guy. And at that time, there was a huge, a lot of people, especially the nationalists in Brazil, which was a big part of the country, they were against the Japanese or even other martial arts, because there weren't only judo coming to Brazil. They had other martial arts coming to Brazil too, like Savate and Greco-Roman style and other martial arts. And since capoeira had been in Brazil for longer and it was considered a Brazilian martial art brought to Brazil through the African slaves, they would prefer to have capoeira as the official self-defense system for the military. And that fight was, or that challenge was a big thing in Brazil, because it just, let's say, it proved that capoeira was the right martial art for the military. Capoeira defeated judo or the martial art from a different country. So it just proved, let's say, that capoeira was the correct martial art to be established in the army or in the military force. And it took a while. That was Siriko, who was the capoeira guy, became really famous after that match. It was a big deal at the time, just confirmed that capoeira was the right martial art at the military. Until then, in 1914, the Maeda with his troop arrived in Brazil, and then even other Japanese later. And then the Brazilians, the military started to adopt more jiu-jitsu, and once judo started winning more matches, then they kind of started realizing that it was probably one of the, was a better course to take the Japanese martial art, even though they had for several years a mix of jiu-jitsu or judo and capoeira in the military.
That's fascinating. Is there any video footage of that? I know you used some stills in your main documentary, but do you know if there's any footage of that mixture of grappling style, like judo and capoeira?
Yeah, I don't think so, because I've been studying a lot too. I study a lot for the documentary and even after now. But there are some stills, like you said, and there are some books from the military in Brazil, manuals covering that style, that mixed style, which was called ataque e defesa, or attack and defense. That was the name of the style that was being taught at the military. They had a manual, a booklet with those moves in the book, mixing capoeira and judo or jiu-jitsu.
That's fascinating. I think that could be your next documentary right there.
Yeah, totally.
that would be fascinating.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
I really liked, you made reference to some academics and researchers, and there was one quote. I don't have it with me at the moment. I'm referencing Cairo's quote there.
José Cairo's. Yeah.
Right. And basically you talk about, I guess, elaborate as to why you think Maeda didn't intend to create local lineage of local Kodokan practitioners. I know I'm asking you to speculate here, but why do you think that continuity wasn't enforced?
Yeah, that's something that really, there are many theories behind. No one really knows exactly what happened, but one of the most accepted theories is that Maeda didn't want to promote someone to the black belt level in Brazil, because he wasn't really, now we don't know if he wasn't really teaching strict Kodokan Judo, or if it was because he was involved with prize fighting, which was against the Kodokan rules. So if he promoted someone to black belt, it wouldn't probably look good on him, because he wasn't really a representative of the Kodokan, because he was doing prize fights. So he's not at that moment, right? He shouldn't be considered as a representative of the Kodokan Judo because he was breaking the rules. So probably that's one of the reasons he didn't want to promote, because he wasn't really following the rules of Kodokan. So out of respect to Kodokan and Jigoro Kano, of course. So, but we don't really know for
Right.
sure. That's a theory that most historians, they agree that was probably the case. But there are also other theories, like he didn't promote because he wasn't really teaching according to the Kodokan methodology. Maybe, who knows? We don't have pictures on that. We don't have footage on that. So, like I said, maybe in the future things could change with more researches being made.
For sure, and it's interesting because he was involved, as you mentioned, in these prize fights, these challenge fights, mainly around carnivals. Yeah, so I mean, around that carny culture, as far as if you know the history of professional wrestling, a lot of that was you know established within that framework, more
Mm-hmm.
or less, and him being a catch wrestler. It's just really fascinating because if you fast forward to combat sports today, that sports entertainment element is part of the algorithm to success for the UFC and any well, at least in North America and
Yeah.
in Japan, right? You have to entertain the fans with some aspect of drama. I want to sorry, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, just another aspect too. Maybe, he was in need of money, too.
Of
Like,
course, yeah, yeah.
we don't know that for sure, because when he got to Brazil, also that was at the beginning of the decline of the economy. Also, they had the World War I just happening. So maybe, could be another reason, we don't know for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the economic case is always a strong one, and it certainly could make sense. You make a really, I gotta say, anyone who's watching this, I hope you do go watch this documentary. It's available on YouTube, and it's really, really well done. It's only 24 minutes, and I think you really appreciate this documentary if you're if you're a fan of combat sports or interested in Brazilian culture. I know there's so many layers to this story, and you had to keep it really tight in that 24 seconds, and you did a remarkable job. But one of the quotes
Thank you.
that really hit me over the head, like, wow, this is really interesting, was when you made reference to the fact that the local BJJ culture, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu culture, rejected, quote, the technical, philosophical, and cultural aspects of the Japanese matrix. In your opinion, what are the ramifications of that rejection, and what are the benefits, if any?
Yeah. hmm I think that was also a way to break free from the judo, or at the time was called jiu-jitsu. So that would create their own style, let's say, right? Because if they follow exactly like what the Japanese thought would be, they would have to follow the Kodokan rules. So they had to break free from that. I think that was one of the reasons. Also because it's different cultures, right? In Japanese, and especially at that time, it was very strict, and the Brazilians, they don't, obviously we appreciate that, but it's not ingrained in the culture. It's more free, and we don't like much to follow the rules,
Hmm.
as in general. So I think that brought a little more, um, we could expand the art in different areas and places without having to follow a guidance from Kodokan. So we could add different techniques from other martial arts, which was the case, adding techniques from capoeira, adding techniques from catch wrestling that maybe even the Gracies learned from Maeda, because he also learned catch wrestling. So it just that that's also one of the differences, right, between Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. They created their own branch. So I think that was necessary. If it wasn't like that, that wouldn't be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I believe.
Now, you mentioned you're obviously still researching a variety of these topics. In
Mhm.
doing this mini documentary, what was the most surprising thing that you came across? What was the one fact that really changed your perspective on these sports?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of stuff, especially because I didn't know much. I had, of course, an idea, but for me, I think the most interesting thing was that when Maeda came to Brazil, he had his troop of 3 or 4 other Japanese, and one of those it was Sadakazu Yunishi. He's not from Kodokan Judo. He's from uh, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu style, and under a guy who is named Tanabe, who is well known for his ground skills. So I think that goes a little bit against some people just saying that, oh no, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is just judo. Of course, the contribution from judo was 90%, let's say. But there was this guy that wasn't from judo, he was from jiu-jitsu. And also Maeda traveled Europe or toured Europe with him, with Yuinishi, plus Taro Miyake and Yuki Utani, who are also not from Kodokan Judo. They are from the same style of jiu-jitsu. So at that time, there was a lot of, they would train together, exchange techniques, ideas. And I think that was the most important piece for me as a Brazilian jiu-jitsu uh, practitioner and teacher, to see that the judo that came to Brazil, the Kodokan judo that came to Brazil, certainly had influences from other styles. We just cannot quantify that. We don't know exactly what Maeda thought and the other guys thought, but certainly there was some influence from the jiu-jitsu styles. And I think that was probably the most important and fascinating piece for me during the research.
Now, you've been involved in this particular sport of jujitsu since '97, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Over the span of 30 years, etc., what would you say? How has the sport evolved? I know it's a loaded question. How yeah, how has the sport evolved, and where do you, from your perspective, where do you see the sport of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu in general? Where do you see it heading?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a lot of changes and evolution, um, especially in the sport side of the art. Still, the self-defense MMA style, there are, of course, still going evolutions happening, and and refinement of techniques, but it's more limited. Even the number of techniques or what you can do in an MMA fight is much more limited than what you can do in a sport, of course, because there are the punches involved. If I'm not worried about your punches, I can do much more stuff, right? Create much more things. And sport jiu-jitsu went into that direction, I believe. It has evolved a lot since comparing from when I started in 1997. And it's hard to say where it's going, because I think they will probably have to change the rules a little bit, because it's starting to get too far away from the original source. It's already very far, where some people sport, for example, you can play sport jiu-jitsu and still have a Brazilian jiu-jitsu game that's you can adapt to MMA, but also you can go completely bananas there and do sport jiu-jitsu where you have no consideration at all. So it goes a little bit away from the original Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I believe, and it could go even further away with more developments, especially with the gi situation where you can use lapel and all that stuff. So I think that eventually they will have to change the rules a little bit, figure out something that keeps, more, a little more realistic, if it's uh, where you could apply to a self-defense situation. Nothing wrong with going to sports too. It could be even like, okay, you want to do a sport, jiu-jitsu, great, but you also have to have a foundation on the self-defense, which is the original Brazilian jiu-jitsu that came from judo. But yeah, it's hard to say. I think it could go a little in a wrong path. So eventually, I think they will have to change the rules. And we see more and more now Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu adding techniques from other martial arts, especially wrestling or anything that works, right? That's the thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We are not under any federation or something that says how you should do, right? The control, the governing body is not really, like in judo, I believe. So yeah, I think that's the things to pay attention there.
What keeps you inspired and motivated as a practitioner and coach when it comes to this sport and this way of life? What keeps you fired up?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say in the beginning, even when I was, I think it changed a lot after I stopped competing, because when I was competing, it was really more about myself, trying to be the best I can be. And I was teaching, but I wasn't as focused as I am now in the students, because I also had to take care of myself and my training for the competitions. Once I stopped training or competing, maybe, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or something like that, then I really enjoy the process of seeing my students growing, and I can see much closer now. I can pay attention much more to my students compared to before, where I was divided between me and them. Now it's all about them. And it's really good to see that I'm able to help, help them to become not only better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, but better person and people too. It's that's the job of a teacher, I guess. See their students grow. That really brings me happiness.
Now, of course, the entire world is in a state of suspended in a way due to COVID-19, and a lot of people have been, in one way or another, unable to train, depending where they are. I'm obviously speaking to you from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. You're in Los Angeles, California.
Mm-hmm.
What advice? A last question for you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you give, or would you give, eager grapplers or jujitsukas, judokas, sambo players, whatever? What advice would you give them in these days, as far as in this situation that we're all in, as far as training,
Mm-hmm.
or the lack of training?
The lack of training. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I, honestly, I expect some students to not come back anymore. Probably, they are doing other sport, they are riding their bikes, they're doing lifting weights at home or stuff like that, and they might feel that, what, I don't miss Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu anymore. I'm good doing this. So I expect that from some students. uh, but for those who really like and really miss Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or judo, I would say, try to, keep moving, keep exercising at home. If you cannot train, we have the gyms open here in LA, but very restricted. It has to be outdoors or with a minimal number of students. So, we have maybe 20% of the total number of students practicing now. But some of them, like I said, they won't come back. Some of them, they're just waiting for a better situation. But I would say if you're not training, then keep yourself moving, exercising at home or outdoors, because to keep your mind sane, right? Because jiu-jitsu helps you with that, or basically any exercise, right? So if you're not exercising, it's, you're probably feeling a little depressed. So, work out as you'd like and wait for the right moment to come back to the gym. And, it's not going to be that bad. You're going to probably be rusty a little bit, but many of your partners are going to be rusty too. So it's we are beginning again, with already some, foundation. So don't worry too much about that. And I would say, yeah, try to maintain active, and if you can, watch videos and tutorials. That will always help you.
Now, where can people find you online if they have other questions that they want to send you? Tell us about your site and so on.
Yeah, I have a website called MMA Leech, MMALEECH.com. I have my instructional videos there. I have my blog there. The video that we were talking about is there, and also on YouTube, MMA Leech on YouTube, Instagram as well, MMA Leech. You guys can always contact me through any one of those channels, email or what. YouTube, I always read. Better if you really want to hear an answer, best from email, because sometimes YouTube, I don't get the notifications. No, but email, certainly I will get it.
Right on. Well, thank you very much for the interview, and more importantly, thank you very much for taking the time to really produce an excellent video and to start this conversation within the community. I really appreciated watching it, and I really look forward to seeing what other great documentaries you'll be putting out on martial arts. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate, and I'm very honored to be here on your podcast.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.